People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their soul. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will guide your life and you will call it fate. Both of these quotes are alluding to one thing, which is the shadow. And the shadow is the aspect in the psyche that you avoid facing. So if you think of your conscious attention, you looking at me right now on this video is you consciously facing me right now. But were you conscious of the fact that you are breathing? Now you are now. Now you are, right? Well, that's the switching of conscious versus unconscious. When you were looking at me, you weren't conscious of yourself breathing until I told you. And that's switching. That's putting the light of conscious attention on that to this. And so the shadow is when you were looking at me and you weren't focused on your breathing. So you're not focused on certain psychological aspects of who you are. For example, that could be, feminine aspects of who you are. For example, with me, it was hard to embrace at first when my son was born a certain way, being a caretaker, being, very understanding of his perspective that he couldn't walk, he couldn't change himself. So I had to be more feminine as a result in terms of his care, in terms of who I was as an individual, which I rejected at first because in society I was made fun of and told, oh, what are you doing? Woman's work, changing your son and doing laundry. And that bothered me because it wasn't fully integrated with my psyche. I repressed it, never looked at it, never acknowledged it. It was feminine aspects that I never addressed, so it was unconscious. That could be evil aspects of who you are as an individual. Those get repressed too. For example, like if you have been mistreated by a certain group of people and, you're very frustrated and you're like, oh, I have a certain, and then you hold it back. You're like, no, fuck that. You're sweeping it under the rug. Sweeping things under the rug, if that's like a family quote, right? And that's like what you and your family live by, then there's a lot of shadows in that family because you're sweeping things under the rug. You're not putting your conscious attention on it. It creates a shadow. And the thing is about the shadow is that it still expresses itself outwardly. Just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean it won't express itself, because it will. It absolutely will. And the more you repress it, the more it compounds, because compounding is inherent in nature. And so it grows. And so it will express itself externally more and more. And that's where mental illness comes in, right? As you get older and certain aspects don't get addressed. And like I said, you could be this maniacal person or you have this idea that you want to conquer this, you want to do that and take down that, but you repress it, you hold it back. It's probably gonna express itself in random rage or random, craziness, right? Until eventually you just become this person who snaps all the time or just freaks out or randomly has sick, twisted jokes. All of a sudden people are like, what the fuck? But if you embrace that aspect of who you are in some form, you acknowledge it, then it won't come out as erratic. You'll feel more whole and you accept yourself. You don't feel like, you don't punish yourself psychologically for having those thoughts, right? Same for feminine aspects in men. Same for overly masculine aspects in women. The women who are extremely scared to, pick up a toolbox or not get their nails done because, they don't want to look too masculine because then they would look like, some dude or whatever. And same with women. So the shadow is an extremely complex and I think one of the most interesting parts of Carl Jung's Carl Jung's work, because once you start acknowledging it and diving into that topic, you start to see it in everybody. You see, for real, like you're like, this person's expressing this, and you're like, whoa, that's a shadow. It's got to be, right. And then you see it in yourself. You're like, oh, whoa, I was doing that. That was unconscious. And then you become aware of all these things, and then your personal perspective broadens and it gets bigger. And then you see a lot of people's plight, right? Their aggravation towards another race, towards this, towards that, can all stem from a shadow. And when it's unconscious, I feel like those get expressed in like a storm, and like a, chaos. It's chaotic. And that's how it tends to express itself. Also, another aspect of the shadow that's really interesting is the collective shadow. So like, for example, you might have a group of people, right? The culture I was a part of, I still am, is hip hop, right? Rap, I don't know, black and brown people, right? Dapping each other up. Barbershops, fried chicken, Tupac, that's the culture, right? And there's more aspects, right? But I'm just kind of touching it real quick. And so collectively, if you leave that box and do something else, they're like, whoa, what are you doing? And so say you might like rock, right? Rock music, right? And you were too afraid to express it within your circle of people who only listen to hip hop, right? And that's culturally accepted. You might repress that aspect, and then randomly as a joke, you'll say something that's like rock related, and they're like, what the hell? That was an unconscious expression of it because you tried to repress it, so it still seeps out. You see what I'm saying? So the shadow is very interesting too in the collective, because it's still, if you think of the collective psyche, it's just a scaled up version of an individual. So a lot of our societal problems collectively is a result of each individual, and it's an expression of the overall general collective psyche. So collectively, a nation like America has shadows, has aspects they don't want to address. And so I find that interesting too. But yeah, so that's a shadow. Let me know what you guys think. If you want me to keep talking about this stuff, if you want me to talk about different topics, let me know. Take it easy.